would like to begin to answer the question to vote or not to vote?
I'll start here. I think we should change the framing because when we say to vote or not to vote, is that on the national level? Is that on the local level? Because I, for one, like, I think you can get more done electorally on the local level from what I've seen from my experience. So when it comes to the local level, I would tell you definitely you should vote. When it comes to the national level, if there isn't a third party or independent candidate, I would tell you that you're wasting your time. So I think we should change the framing.
Well, I think you just did.
I agree with Sabby, actually. Those are my sentiments completely.
I agree with Sabby wholeheartedly there because, as the saying goes, all politics is local. And voting on the local and state level, whether you know it or not, has a greater impact on your life than you imagine. And we've got to vote out these corrupt politicians on our local and state level. But to not vote at all, in my opinion, just allows the corruption to continue being there.
Well, I'll go next. I definitely agree as well about voting on the state, local level, as well as ballot initiatives. I think the problem that we face is so many people are so fed up that they just don't do it at all. I mean, in my state, we only had a 45% turnout. And so that's the thing, is getting people to, it's not to understand, because I understand why they don't vote, but giving them something to vote for, a reason to turn out.
Yeah, I fully agree, with Brandy on giving them something to vote for. I do realize, and I think there is good reason that there's some people who may be so disenchanted with the system that they choose not to vote. And I really don't necessarily blame them. And I say this, if you're not going to vote, then okay. But in place of that, are you doing something as far as activism, organizing, something on the ground that's local in order to change your community other than voting? I think that's another viable option outside of that if you choose not to do any type of voting. But when it comes to voting, I do also agree with Sabby. When it comes to voting, the local level, the state level, ballot initiatives, these things are a direct route into affecting your lives in a more direct and tangible way. And also, if you do want to vote nationally, then it would be, if it were something like a someone who was independent or a third party, I say give it still a shot. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. I just don't believe doing it through the duopoly. That's the only thing, because I see it as a fool's errand to do it through the duopoly.
I really believed in Bernie, and I worked hard nationally. I devoted my time, and then I worked some for the state, but I was more into the national because I understood the capacity and capabilities of of our money at the federal level and its ability, to create good jobs and a better quality of lifestyle if people would understand true macroeconomics instead of the microeconomic spin and BS that they give us. But I can see now that to try to elect at that level, it is just so corrupt and bought that you've got to work at the lower levels. I mean, and in the meantime, I think we need to organize. I really believe we need to work toward direct action, and that takes 3.5 percent of a population for successful direct action. And in the United States, that's about 12 million people.
Did you have any comments, Keith?
Yeah, I was playing hops. What was it, Double Dutch, trying to find a way to jump in. But yeah, I agree. Like, it definitely starts locally. I think people are kind of figuring that out. I think one of the biggest positives, I think, is that because there's a lot of people from California and New York, they can't live in those places no more, so they're actually going to um, and to go around trying to find cheap places to live, and in doing so, they're basically turning those places more blue. And I think that is a potential positive for people who are progressives and people who want to see more positive change, because when they turn these other areas more blue, it actually gives us opportunity because there's more people in I guess redder states who are now open to, like, hey, like, maybe we should have more public transit, maybe we should have um I don't know, better infrastructure or something like that. Before, it would have been impossible to get people to accept it, but now you got people from different places like, yeah, man, I'm used to this stuff and it's not here, and they're going to use their power, money, and influence to make it happen. So it's a little, you gotta find nuggets of positivity where you can. So
Okay, thank you, Keith. And Dee?
Hello. Yes, I'm with everybody with saying local. You know, local politics is so important, and it's so important to meet the people too. Like between elections, when you attend different meetings, just getting to know who everybody is, like local county commissioner meetings, if you have them, or whatever you call them in your local neighborhoods. Because there's people that you run into that there could be a whole host of things that you don't agree on. And then you find there are things that you do. So at least you all can campaign around the stuff you agree on. And it's just really nice to get to know who all these different people are and really kind of make that local family.
So I'd like to answer my own question. Actually, it wasn't my question, but the following way. Okay, I agree that I would like to vote at the state and local levels, but also at the national level. So I'd like to vote at all levels. And the reason why is related to my purpose, okay, in voting. My purpose is to get the toxic money out of politics. And the way I want to do that is to organize a movement to get everybody to follow a simple rule. Specifically, if someone is taking big money, and we can define that in terms of sources of money, okay, and the identity of the big money. But if anybody is taking big money, then that's it. They have to be dumped because they're going to represent the big money and not going to represent their voters. If we want people to represent us, we have to elect people who are not taking any big money. No exceptions. In other words, just chop off their heads, figuratively speaking, if they are taking the big money, of course. Okay, I think this should apply at the state level, at the local level, at the dog catcher level. It should apply to everybody. It should be a requirement in terms of a requirement of the voters that the people who run do not take any big money from the special interests. Now, voters as a block, as a body, have the capability to enforce this if we all come together and we act in that way. we could change the House of Representatives. I'm just estimating broadly and generally now. We could get rid of what? 420 out of the 435 representatives we have now. If we did this all over the country, it would totally change the House. It would end up changing the rules of the House. Okay, it would end up probably getting rid of gerrymandering due to the passage of national laws controlling that. Of course, the House alone is not sufficient to pass laws. We have to use, dump the corruption on the Senate, okay, as well. I want to emphasize here, too, I'm not just talking about dumping the incumbents. I'm talking about voting against anybody who's taking big money. So voting against challengers who are taking the big money, too. In terms of loose estimates, that means we'd be getting rid of almost every Republican and almost all but a few Democrats in a single election. So if you're against a duopoly, this is a way of getting rid of the duopoly if we can create this particular movement. Now, I don't know if we can, and I don't know if we can do this in 2 years, but I have the feeling that if we can't do it in 2 years, the other things we want to do, we plan to do, and we hope to do will not work to save us from the climate emergency. We only have a few years to act and act successfully. We have frittered away all the time that we have. And we've got to put an end to this. We also have to put an end to people dying when there is Medicare for all that could easily be passed. We have to put an end to all sorts of things. We have to put an end to student debt. We have to put an end to child poverty. We need the child tax credits. There are so many problems our society has that we could solve if our representatives were representing us. Now, we know our representatives don't represent us, and we all know it's because of the money they're taking. So how long are we going to tolerate this?
I'm sorry, Joe, but we've been doing this since 2018.
Yeah,
We have been voting for, and there's an echo somewhere. We have been voting for and canvassing for and supporting politicians that have not taken big money. That's what Justice Democrats was about. We have been doing this for years. The problem is, even the ones who didn't take big money went into a party that is corporate and that is owned by Wall Street, and they still sold out the working class and the poor people in order to keep their seat. So we've been doing this. Like, that's the thing. This is not a new, like, I get what you're saying. Like, maybe they should do that on the Republican side too. The Republican Party, they're not even looking at that. The voters on the Republican side, they're not concerned with that. I've had this conversation with them. On the Democrat side, and these progressive candidates that have come through, that was the whole purpose for Justice Democrats, and it failed. Everyone talks a good game until they get into office, because again, they are not in control. Both of those parties are controlled by Wall Street and corporations. So until you get corporate money out of electoral politics, nothing is going to change.
I think what we have discussed is that we have to push the third party because, like even you talked about on your show, Sabby, even the ones that ran on not taking the corporate money, then they're turning around and funneling money into super PACs to corporate Democrats. And so where we're at is the only way to vote against the corruption is to vote third party.
some of them gave money to Republicans.
Yeah, some have even given money to Republicans. So either
the point that I want to make, though, is like, this is not new. This is not a new concept. This idea of Democrat politicians donating money to Republicans, that's not new. That's been going on for years. So the thing is this: at the end of the day, These are two corporate parties that work together to prevent any type of rise on the left. They agree on that. This is why someone like a Bernie Sanders will not get through, because the DNC will not allow him to win. That's why they changed the rules during the Democratic primary debates. And I'm sorry if I'm coming across abrasive, but we really have to wake up to this realization. Until you change the actual structure that's in place, that's not going to change.
I do not find you abrasive, okay, at all. It's a legitimate reply to what I said. But I would like to give everybody a chance to reply, because this is a panel, and I think we all should have our say. So, JB?
As far as the duopoly is concerned, I feel what good is having a progressive politician who doesn't take corporate money if they're following the orders of the ones that do take corporate money. It's just like, for instance, if you have someone who's robbing a bank and you're the driver and you are driving a getaway car, you may have not done the robbing of the bank, but you were a co-conspirator in the actual crime. You were complicit in the crime itself. And so I see the same thing as many of the progressives who say they don't take any type of corporate money, and yet they're still the ones who are voting for the Iron Dome. They are the ones who are voting to increase the Capitol Police budget. They are the ones that are continuously voting for this proxy war in Ukraine. So they're actually still continuing to do the bidding of the corporations. They just have the plausible deniability of saying, well, we don't take corporate money, even though they're still doing the bidding of corporations indirectly.
By the way, I agree with that, and I agree with most of what Sabby said also. Gregory?
I don't know if he stepped away.
He said in the chat he had to step away real quick, so he'll be back on.
Okay, Dee, do you have anything to say on that subject?
Yeah, I understand what Sabby's saying. It's been, a long time trying to get money out of politics, but I'm still going to try to, like I said, I'm working with you on this issue. I'm still going to try to do it, even though I know it's just a lot of people are worn out. I know they're worn out from trying to, get the money out of politics and seeing all the corruption, and it just seems somebody else buys them. But I just think we can keep trying. I mean, it's up to the.
Okay,
Keith, everybody has a feel. What's that?
I was asking Keith if he had any comment, because I thought you were done.
Oh, that's fine.
If you're not done, please.
No, I'm done.
Okay, Keith.
Yeah. So for me, I don't like. I'm optimistic about politics, but only for like a long-term thing. Like, I don't think we're going to get the progress we want to see in 5 or 10 years. I think it's probably like 20, 30 years out. But the one thing I kind of see Bernie as like the Goldwater for like progressives. If that makes any sense, because as we know, Goldwater pretty much was like the candidate that popularized conservative thought, and it progressed from there. I think Bernie Sanders popularized progressive thought, and I think it's blossoming. But even though we're doing what we can to get certain politicians in, the machine is the machine. Like, the only way to change the machine is to take away certain parts and put in new parts, and that's a whole other process of itself, and it's not going to happen within one election cycles or even 2 election cycles. It's going to take a lot of consistent, persistent political action, both grassroots and local, just to start, and then move on to to the more national and federal. So I don't know. I think if you temper your expectations, you can see some changes. But if you expecting too much, I'm not saying you want to hear it is, but I'm saying if you expecting the moon, you're going to be sadly disappointed, and that's what will kill your political activism quicker. 'Cause if you're expecting the moon, you don't get it. Well, of course, yeah, you expected it. You expected the moon in 5 years. Of course, it didn't happen.
Madeline's here. She's in the background if somebody can let
Yeah,
me.
I know she's in the background, but I'm not in the position to let her in.
Okay. I
It's
just
got to be Shane. So the question is, where's Shane? Okay, Teresa, did you have a further comment on this?
No, I'm good.
Okay, Gregory, did you?
Back to the third party aspect of our discussion tonight. And this is something that I've been talking about with Joe and Brandy for a while now. We vote for like a Green Party candidates, and this also goes to the issue of ballot access for the Green Party. If your state does not have ballot access for the Green Party, these candidates can run as an independent candidate and get elected that way. So that way we can still get these progressives, the true progressives, elected, whether it be congressional or state level races where they're really needed, along with the local level. So going that route with the third parties, along with independents, we could literally elect a lot of people who are not bought and paid for by special interest groups, PACs, corporate funding of elections, and so forth. We just need to get the movement going to get people who are elected, who are not bound by the duopoly parties, because the two-party system has been failing us, and it's time for the public to stop pretending as if the two-party system represents them when they do not. Vote third party, or if you're in a state like I am, like here in Georgia, where the Green Party absolutely has no ballot access, run as an independent candidate, but form a new caucus with the Greens on the state and federal level that way as well. So that's also a route that we can go.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Is Madeline still here, or did she get discouraged for a minute?
No, I think it may just be her internet that she popped out.
Oh, yes, I forgot that her internet is weak because she's in Colombia
Yeah.
at this point.
Is it okay if I say something real quick?
Oh, as a matter of fact, I was going to ask you to say something, not necessarily so quick even.
Well, I was just going to say, I've reached the point. I started as a third party voter, worked with the Democratic Party for 2 years and had enough of it. I've pretty much reached the point. I will not vote for a Democrat. I will not vote for a Republican. I vote third party. I try to support mutual aid groups. And, we talk a lot with Around the World of Brandy and Dee. We talk a lot about foreign policy. And even our foreign policy is not going to change until we dump the duopoly.
So, Madeline, I'd like your comments.
Okay.
What I started off with is, okay, I basically put out a presentation on Dump the Corruption, a presentation you've had before, so I don't think I have to repeat that. Sabby replied to that, okay, and she said, we've been doing Dump the Corruption since 2018. That's what the Justice Democrats were doing. That's what the people who were running as people who did not take big money were doing. And so we've done that already, and it's been a failure. It has not succeeded. So what I want to ask you is, do you believe that what I've been suggesting has been done before?
First, thank you for asking me to participate. Second, let me apologize. There's a party going on behind me with lots of music, so there might be a little bit of extra background noise. But
Hey,
I
party,
wanted to
party.
participate. I'll mute when I finish. But no, I don't think what you're suggesting has been done before. It's one thing to be a Justice Democrat and put the word Democrat at the end of your name. It's another to dump the corruption from outside of both political parties. And then to also, at the same time, that we expose the corruption with the Democrats and the Republicans and the Republicans and the Democrats. We build an independent movement around the issues that those Democrats and Republicans taking the big money are blocking us on. Like a real Green New Deal, we'll never get it within the Democratic Party. So we need an independent movement for that, for a real Green New Deal. And we need an independent movement to end the wars. We used to have one, but then it got channeled into the Democratic Party. We need an independent movement for Medicare for all, not one that gets channeled into the Democratic Party. It needs to be grassroots. It needs to grow. And there need to be candidates from independent parties putting out there, taking leadership in all of that, and building the base for an independent, corruption-free movement. Now, will that work? Maybe yes, maybe no. But it really hasn't, in my opinion, as a six-time Green Party candidate for public office, it really hasn't been done before. And now I'll mute because I'm sure the music from the party is a major distraction.
So let me reply to Sabby myself. I don't think this has been done before at all. I don't see candidates running across the country talking about dumping the corruption, talking about why they should be elected as opposed to the opponents who are taking the big money, because they're not taking the big money. They will represent their voters. The Democratic Party candidates who are running, the Republican Party candidates who are running, cannot possibly represent the voters because they're taking the big money. In other words, I don't see dump the corruption as the lead issue they're running on. They're running on Medicare for all. They're running on the Green New Deal. They're running on student loan forgiveness. They're running on dozens of things, but they're not running on democracy. They're not running on forcing the people who get into the Congress to give up the big money, because if they don't, they're going to lose. The primary issue should be those folks take big money, both the Democrats and the Republicans. You cannot vote for them. And guess what? If a large number of people believe you and join this movement, then who are they going to have to vote for during the campaigns? The third parties. You all want third parties to be successful. Everybody wants third parties to be successful. I want third parties to be successful. How can we possibly get them to be successful? Only by sweeping the Democrats and Republicans out of office. How can we sweep them out of office? By making the case that they don't represent the voters. They don't represent the people. They represent the big donors, and that's all they do. And that's why we can't pass Medicare for all. That's why we can't pass the Green New Deal. That's why we can't codify the Roe v. Wade. That's why we can't do anything that's good for the people, because they're not representing us. I know you agree they don't represent us. They don't represent us in the Senate. They don't represent us in the House. They
So
don't
are you
represent us in the presidency.
Now, how do we get a
so
foot
are you
in?
are you talking about taking Republicans, Democrats, Independents, running under this one message of dump the corruption, putting them under like one umbrella, so to speak? Is that what you're talking about? Like all of them coming together for one movement?
No,
I'm
just third
talking about
party.
all the voters coming together in one movement, trying to persuade all the voters that they don't really have representatives, that voting has been an illusion for them. It is not real because they're electing people who have the donor money and who represent the donors as a result and not them. And I'm all about appealing to them and saying to them, you need people who are going to represent you. And the only way you're going to do that is to get rid of the donor money. And the only way you're going to get rid of the donor money, there is only one way. Make it toxic to the candidates who take it or who are supported by it. You have to make the donor money toxic. And you can only do it by making it a litmus test. And that litmus test has to be that if you're taking it, you automatically lose.
But
Because
you
everybody's
do,
Right. But I guess the question I'm asking is you're wanting Republican candidates and Democrat candidates to run under that message, to
yes.
say, hey, I'm not going to take the corporate money. I'm taking
No,
grassroots.
I don't care what the Republican and Democratic candidates do. I'm saying that the Republican and Democratic candidates who are running now are running on the big money almost universally. 95% of them are running on the big money. I don't expect
Right.
them to change because we develop a campaign in 2023 or 2024. I expect them to lose. I expect them to lose because they won't give up the big money. And that's
Right. But
open the way to third party candidates.
I guess what
I think I'm
okay.
picking up what you're putting down here. I think what you're saying is for any candidate, don't matter what it is, if you're on the ballot, the litmus test is have you taken any money? And if you're taking money, don't matter what political party you are, you're going to lose.
And no
Yeah.
matter what justification, and no matter what rationalization, and no matter what you put forward of what you've done in the past, if you're taking the big money now, you're out. That's what I'm
Yes,
saying.
so I hear that, but the problem is that I feel like we did that with Bernie Sanders. He told us that same message in 2016 and in 2020. Don't You can't do the corruption. I'm a grassroots candidate. You need to support me. Don't vote for the corporate and we totally got that message. But what happens when those candidates lose and they tell you, okay, you got to vote for my corporate opponent that I lost to?
Yeah,
Bernie Sanders was one man in 2016 saying that, and one man in 2020 doing that. What I am saying is that all of the third party candidates, and maybe some Democrats or Republicans too, who have some smarts and understand what is going on, that all of them would be running on the idea that if you take the big money, you're out. If you take the big money, the voters should not be voting for you. And I'm saying the whole environment changes then. I'm trying to change the cultural environment of politics. And I'm saying if we do that, we will sweep out most of the House in 2024 and 1/3 of the Senate, and will scare the daylights out of the other 2/3 of the Senate. That's what I'm saying.
Here's the only thing, though. It wasn't just Bernie, but there was other candidates as well that were running as well that were also not taking corporate money. And then what did they do in 2020? They all got behind Joe Biden anyway. They got behind somebody who was corporate.
They all got behind Joe Biden anyway. Why? Because the leadership of the party, the power structure of the party remained intact. Because a few of them won, but that didn't change the power structure. You have made the point, JB, a very valid point. These people come into the Democratic Party, the power structure wraps around them, and they start to cave. They can't outface that power structure. But let's take the House as an example. What happens if in 2024 we sweep 420 of them out of power? Then what happens? We got 420 new people coming in. They know they won because they weren't taking any big money. Who are they going to turn to for support then? They're not going to turn to the donors. They're going to turn to us. And then democracy can really work. That's what I'm saying. At least voting democracy can really work. I'm not suggesting that's all there is to democracy. I am for all the social movements. I'm for all the activism that is going on. I think what I'm suggesting rides on the top of the activism. What I'm suggesting is not electoralism. It's disrupting electoralism, turning it on its head. It's a revolution in voting. That's what I'm suggesting. Bernie Sanders never suggested that. And it's never been implemented. It's never been tried.
Well, no, I mean, when I saw Bernie at Boston Common for the rally here, he did say political revolution, and that's what people thought they were getting themselves into. But I just want to be very clear, and I don't want to take up too much of time. I know it's the panel. I just want to be very clear that we have to be realistic here in reference to how the DNC is going to push back against something like this. They can handpick the candidates. They've argued this in court. So even if we do all of that and the DNC comes in and says, you know what, we're just going to change the rules, like they changed the rules to get Michael Bloomberg on the debate stage. How do you fight that? That's the question that I'm asking. How do you fight that?
This is the way we fight it. Okay, this is the way we fight it. The litmus test remains. Okay, the Democrats can do what they want to do. They can change the rules. They can do all sorts of things. But at the same time, if everybody defeats their candidates for the very reason that the DNC is supporting those candidates, they're out. They're out. The power structure is out. The environment is changed. In other words, you are presenting objections based on the way the system works now. And I'm telling you, the sweeping out of all the people at once will change the system.
But that won't happen without a revolution.
Yeah.
An actual revolution, something that is more than just political. And I get exactly what you're saying. I'm talking, and the thing is that unfortunately, just going that route, unless you're talking about going completely outside of both parties, if that's what you're talking about, even still, that is a very deeply uphill battle, because you're talking about really going up against not just a political apparatus, but also really the physical apparatuses that they would push in order to do that. Because to be honest with you, that's the only route that I can possibly see anything happening, is an actual revolution happening.
I agree, JB. One of the things that we look back at is CalCare. With the Democratic supermajority, we know the federal runs money into the states. So the only way to beat that is going to be through a third party or a physical revolution.
Well, I don't know, but if you believe that, then the question is, what's your time frame?
Well, that's just it. You've just given us 2 years. I think if that fails, we could be organizing for direct action right now.
Well, you can go ahead and organize for direct action. I'm not trying to distract you. Okay, go ahead and organize for direct action. I'm all for it. I'll support you for the direct action. Okay, what I'm saying, though, is if we don't solve this problem within the next 2 years, if we don't start to address the climate problem and get Medicare for all in the next 2 years or so, we're done. They've got us. And they're walking the death march. That's what's going on. We all know this. We can't do something in 10 years. We don't have 10 years. We don't even have 6 years.
I'm just going to tell
fight
you
now. And this is about fighting now.
I just want to be realistic with people and be honest. When I interviewed Rokana this year recently, he explained and made it very clear to me about Medicare for all. Even though him and there are others in the House that do support it, he told me we are never going to get Medicare for all unless you have a president who wants it and a Congress that wants it. So if the House doesn't want it and the Senate doesn't want it and the president does, all three have to want it, because even if Bernie Sanders would have won and said, let me do this by executive order, the House could veto it. So this was a reality check for me too. And that's the point. I really want to drive that home, because I don't want people to have these expectations that are not realistic. And realistically, on the national level, all three have to be on board. And right now, according to the votes, they don't have it. Our best shot at exposing who those politicians were was if the squad would have forced the vote, and they failed. We couldn't even get them to do that during a pandemic.
I was in that movement too, to force the vote, but not just to get some votes on the floor. I was for them getting rid of Nancy Pelosi then on July 3rd, 2021. That was my end of the movement. Unfortunately, I was drowned out by Jimmy Dore. If there had been a movement to get rid of Nancy Pelosi then, and we had gotten rid of Nancy Pelosi then, our situation might be different from what it is now. But that's water under the bridge. The important point here, okay, again, is that you have to think about this from the standpoint of, if we are successful in building a movement over the next 2 years, then the Congress won't be opposed to this. Then the question will be, are there enough House members? Are there enough Senate members in favor of Medicare for all to override a presidential veto? That possibility is there too, according to the Constitution. If we replace 410 Congress people or 420 House people, the possibility of overriding a veto is going to be there. Okay, if we replace 33 senators, the possibility of overriding a veto is there. Replace 33 of them and scare the others, and they know 70% of the voters want Medicare for all. Are they then going to dare to vote against it when they don't have any money to manipulate opinion?
And replace them with third-party candidates.
Huh?
I said replace them with third-party candidates.
Of course they'll be replaced with third-party candidates, because all the major party candidates are taking money.
Exactly.
Even the squad is taking money from the committees, the party committees. That's big money too. That's not allowed under this. And by the way, I'm talking about doing this at the national level, the state level, and the local level all at once. So the California objection doesn't apply, because all of the California members of the assembly who are taking the big money would be out.
But then there will be more than 430 people. That will be probably over 1,000 people, because you're talking about the state legislators as well.
I was only talking about the Congress at that point. But
yeah.
I did say this movement has to go at all levels, which means that, yeah, there would be many, many more people thrown out at once. And that would be a real political revolution. What Bernie was talking about, he wasn't talking about that. What he was talking about was a revolution in persuading people to go to Medicare for all, doing the Green New Deal, doing that kind of thing. He never envisioned the wholesale defeat of the whole House, or the wholesale defeat of 33 of the senators in one election cycle. He never envisioned that. Not in a million years. Why? Because he was being realistic. Now, I believe I am being really realistic too. What's realistic about my position is that if we don't do it, we're dead. So we better do it. We have no alternative.
Well, I feel the same. We have no alternative. We've got to be loud. We have to do it now.
If we don't change the direction of this political system by the start of the Congress in 2025, we are finished. And the world is probably finished too. And we better start recognizing that aspect of the realism of our situation, because we continue to deny that. Okay, I heard the panel here, a little earlier tonight with Kit. Okay, I think you were on that panel also, Sabby. okay, and a few others, okay, were on it, okay, as well. And you all were talking really good stuff about third parties and what could be done to get the third parties in. And you also spoke about how long it would take. And kids said, we might not even be able to do this in my lifetime. We don't have Kit's lifetime. We don't have my lifetime. And I am 83.
But realistically, we're not going to replace those congressmen and women in 3 years. Realistically, we're
Why
not.
not?
Not the amount that you're talking about.
Why not? If we build
Because
this movement and everybody is agreed that that's the way they're going to vote, it's mechanical. We will replace them.
No,
Got to
you
convince the
won't.
public. We gotta,
In 3 years, you won't. I'm just
I
being
think we
realistic
need,
because I know how the money works and I followed the money very carefully. And one thing I have to
I
tell
have
you is
followed the
this.
money very carefully too, and I know how
Okay,
the money works also. That's
but no,
why I want to do this.
what I'm trying to tell you is if you pay attention to what happened with Justice Democrats in the beginning, the first couple of people that got through with the squad, that was not even supposed to happen. They probably thought, oh, okay, they have no chance. They're grassroots candidates. They're running up against incumbents. They have no chance to get in. Since those four got in, the Democratic Party has changed their strategy to prevent the other progressives from getting in. There were several progressives that ran for 2022. And the Democratic Party, they had establishment candidates put up PACs against them to stop them from getting in. This is why the progressives in the Congress did not increase to the level that it should have come this time around, that and because of the way that the squad has been voting. But this is part of the reason, because they were able to put PACs up against them. So then what ends up happening is those progressive candidates, like someone like a Maxwell Frost, they have to end up turning on their leftist principles and moving further to the right just so they don't get those PACs put up against them and so that they can win. And so the question that we have to ask is, do we really want someone who is willing to have to do that, move closer to the right so that they can avoid the big money from groups like AIPAC so that they can get in? Or do you really want someone who is truly going to stand by their principles? And if you really want someone that's truly going to stand by their principles, those people are going to have a difficult time getting in right now. The people that got in before, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, those people were the exception. It has not been that way since then. And that's what I'm trying to explain. The Democratic Party, they adjusted to prevent more of progressives getting in unless you move further to the right. So if we're having that problem in the Democratic Party, how are you going to get the Republican Party, who, by the way, they're fine with the corporate money? They're fine with it. How are you going to get them to do the same thing and get all these people out in 3 years?
Well, first of all, it's only 2 years until the election.
well,
Okay.
That's even worse. That's even worse.
Okay, apart from that, you're making my argument for me because, first of all, the Justice Democrats did not have their candidates run on Dump the Corruption. And they only had a few candidates run, okay, on Dump the Corruption. And they were a top-down organization. They didn't have a movement running.
No, that's incorrect. I'm sorry. No, Joe, that is incorrect. I know specifically AOC definitely ran on that. And AO said she was primarying Joe Crowley because he was corporate and because he was corrupt. That is incorrect.
AOC is one person.
Ilhan Omar did the same thing. So did Rashida Tlaib and so did Ayanna Pressley. Ayanna Pressley was in my district. So I know that for a fact.
I am talking about hundreds of challengers running on that. I'm not talking about 1, 2, 3, or 4 people.
Okay, and what I'm telling you is realistically, how are you going to get hundreds of challengers to do this within 2 years and to get all those people to win and beat those incumbents that are sitting in?
And this election process, how is this going to work? How are we going to select these candidates, or are we going to ask, or are they just going to stand up and say, I want to run? Because typically I prefer the same model that Shama Sawant and Socialist Alternative do, where they actually call the people to action rather than people saying that they want to run. Because typically people who say they want to run, it's easier to push them towards wanting to be careerists than the people who reluctantly just don't want to. So, like, how is that going to work as well when it comes to choosing the candidates who we want to run in that space?
Okay, I'm afraid I believe that we cannot choose the candidates, that the candidates come up through a bottom up sort of process. They're going to be candidates from multiple parties, multiple third parties, and they're going to stand and they're going to say, I'm running because I want to dump the corruption. And then I'm also in favor of this bunch, okay, of other things. And you need representatives. You must have people who will represent you. And I am going to represent you. I ask you the following question. What if AOC had won and the whole Congress was filled with people like that who were not representing the donors? What would the AOC be like today, not having had to face such a power structure?
Here's an issue, though, is we got to look at AOC's background. We got to look at every candidate's background.
We
We're
can't do
not
that.
going
It's impractical.
we're not going to do it through we're not going to get anywhere through the Democratic Party or through the Republican Party.
We're not going to
I'm
get
just
anywhere.
being realistic, because the
Well,
other
he was
question we
talking
need
about
to
going
ask.
through independent parties.
Yeah, we've got to go through third party and independents. Because
Well, the
I
other
don't
question,
think we're going through the Democratic Party.
All right, independence, and we've got to sell this. We've got to really.
Yeah, we got to sell this with independence. Okay, in my view, almost all the Democrats are going to lose, and almost all the Republicans are going to lose, because almost all of them are running on big money. And if
But-
there are a handful of Democrats who are not running on big money and they get through, so what?
but
we've
how are
also
you going
got
to hold?
convince voters.
How are you going to hold them accountable? Because this is the problem we ran into with the progressives. They say all the right things, but then once they got in, there was no way to hold them accountable for not doing what they said they were going to do. And
Okay.
then they shut off independent media. So how do you hold those politicians accountable that run even through this movement? Once they get into DC, they're not touchable to us. So how do we hold them accountable if they decide they get there, they're offered book deals, and they do get this? They get these things just being there 5 years. So what are they going to do, or what are we going to do if they renege on their promises and there's no way to hold them accountable?
Okay.
Like what JB was saying, and I very much so agree with him on, we need to go about it the way Kashama Sawant did it. And I think that would be the best case going forward, is to do it the Kashama Sawant method.
Mhm.
And that's
Okay. First of all,
Sorry.
I don't know that I'm suggesting that we do it in a different way than Kashama Sawant. But what I am suggesting is that for all of the great work of Kashama Sawant and what she has accomplished, she is one person and there are no other Kashama Sawants. I'm not saying there might not be other Kashama Sawants, but what I am saying is that if there are other Kashama Sawants who are coming forward, they are going to join our movement because they are going to see the potential of that movement.
I have this question. What is the potential for going in and taking over, say, the Green Party, since they already have the apparatus nationwide? In fact, they're outside of our borders. They're actually international. What's to say that we don't take that up and then supercharge that? Because here's the thing that I realized, especially being in this independent media space. one of the problems that we run into, and a lot of times people will say, well, the Green Party's just not popular. I think one of the issues is we don't make them popular. And
True.
we have an independent media apparatus. Why not come together and just start propping up more of the Matthew Hoes and more of the Dr. Jill Steins and more of the Shama Sawants so that they are inescapable from being seen? Because a lot of times, unfortunately, what we now notice is that they just don't have the name recognition and the policies aren't out there. Like, for instance, people don't realize that reparations has been on the Green Party platform for God knows how long, and how many Black people actually know that reparations are on the Green Party platform. They'll point to Marianne Williamson and the Democratic Party, but they don't know jack squat about the Green Party platform.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think we need to start building them up and building up other different third parties that are anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist in order to really push them out there. I think that it might be a viable option.
I agree
Yeah,
with
but
you,
that'll have to
JB.
start in a local level though, because in
True.
terms of
Yeah.
the national, like people are basically people are too afraid of the other side to risk basically voting third party independent. Like that's why they typically don't do it, especially like minority people, like Black people, like we don't trust. Like basically, we think the Republicans are going to put us back in chains. And we thought that way before. What's the name said it? Joe Biden said it, right? Like so like for the federal level, that's pretty much going to be on lock for the foreseeable future. I don't think there's any wiggle room in there because Republican policies are just so draconian, and so consequential. And yet, Democrats' policies are also consequential, but not as consequential. Because like Republicans, like literally want to take away people's rights, where Democrats are like we want to give corporations more rights. It's a little bit of a different risk pool. But on a local level, you can risk, voting for a Green Party, what's called like Senate candidate, or a Green Party, I don't know, chief of police or whatever you vote for, dog catcher, doesn't matter. That people are more willing to make that risk on a national level. Like people have a short, don't have that much faith in that.
Yeah, and I think we've definitely got to work harder on the independent media of bringing these third party candidates on. I was a big supporter of Delilah because I'm in Arkansas. So I'm right there by Texas. And I pushed Delilah in the Arkansas political circles. And trust me, I got griped out by many Democrats for it, but I don't care. We need more of the third party candidates, and we need to start at the local level and work the way up. But I think that that's the only way that we're going to see any change in this country, not only for us citizens here, but also for our fellow man around the world. We're not going to see any change for the Palestinians or for the Kurdish people until we make change here in our government. I also like the fact that BRICS is growing, which will create a more unipolar world, which weakens the power that America has on the European countries. They're seeing the effects of following America right now and struggling this winter. And that's my only thing is we cannot work within the Democratic Party and we cannot work within the Republican Party, and the squad proved to us that fails. Will fail every time working within the Democratic Party.
So let me say, JB, that sure, supercharge the Green Party. I'm all for supercharging the Green Party. I consider myself a Green Party person myself. Okay. So yeah, we ought to supercharge it and do all we can to see that the Green Party is successful. But we're going to be facing the big money coming into two parties. If we get the big money out first, and then we supercharge the Green Party, great. But if we supercharge the Green Party first, and we don't get the big money out of politics,
We
it is
can't.
not going to work in any length of time that will be practicable for us.
We
No
can't
matter
get
how hard we work.
the Democrats and Republicans will not let go of the corporate money.
Good.
So re-electing them will not work. We have
Good.
to do it through the Green Party
Good.
or other
That's all
independents.
good. They won't let go of the corporate money. So if we get this idea spread to everybody in the country, the Democrats and Republicans will be swept out because they're taking the corporate money.
We just got to convince voters.
That's
vote for
the
third
point.
parties.
This movement is aimed at the voters. It's not really aimed at the candidates. It's aimed at the voters. It's to say, look, you want a democracy? You have to have people who represent you. You can't have people who represent you if they're taking the big donor money. We have to somehow get that into people's heads. Once we do, and once they accept that, we can get the toxic money out. And by the way, that's the only way to get the big money out. Because, of course, they're not going to vote to get it out. Democrats and Republicans are not going to vote to get it out.
I'm a little bit.
What I was going to
go
also
ahead.
add was with the Green Party, they've got to reach out also to key demographics. Like the key demographics would be the Black and brown voters, along with the younger millennial and Gen Z voters who see their futures being squashed by the two-party system.
Yes.
And like with the talk of reparations, which I support wholeheartedly, and it is a key component of the Green Party platform, and reach out to go to college campuses and reach out to millennial voters, Gen Z voters. It's all going to be more successful if you have the voter outreach teams on the ground, as with the Green Party, going all over the place, whether you're a local candidate, whether you're a statewide candidate, federal candidate. It all comes down to voter outreach. And as somebody who has worked in voter outreach and analysis myself over the last 2 to 4 years, I could tell you that reaching out to key demographics in key communities that you can reach out to and win over their hearts. And something that I've always thought about is you're going to have to open your heart and listen to the concerns that each and every one of the demographics are faced with, whether it's the talks of reparations, whether it's student loan debt forgiveness for younger generations and also other generations. It has to come from the heart. You want elected representatives who will sit there quietly, open their heart, open their mind, and be there and go to, like, let's say here in Georgia, go to Atlanta, use your voice to fight for your constituents. Go to DC, do the same thing as you would do here in the state of Georgia, like in Atlanta, Georgia. You have to open your heart and listen to the key demographics and reach out to them that way. And then you win over the voters.
Yeah, and I think we got to do this while also preparing for a possible general strike. Because if it doesn't work, it's going to be the next step.
Yes, I think so too.
So just to be clear, because I want to make sure people fully understand, just to be clear, you're not asking for those candidates to necessarily, you're not asking for those candidates to run through the Democratic Party or the Republican Party.
No, no,
Hell no.
no.
Okay. That's what I wanted to be clear about, because I think I've heard this idea before, and what was pushed was putting them through the Democratic Party still.
No.
But
No.
That's
I
not
get-
an option here.
I get what you're saying. It's just I think we need to be realistic in reference to the timeline. And then also going back to the money, I think we need to be realistic with that too. I'm talking about powerful companies here. I'm talking about banks. I'm talking about JP Morgan. I'm talking about BlackRock. Like, these people are not easily defeated.
I know.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is important is we need to count on facing this amount of money and corruption when it does happen. And so I'm glad you gave that clarification, Joe. So basically, what it sounds like you're saying is that pushing more independents out there, and despite of the Democratic and Republican parties, do I get that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So that makes sense. Okay, so it looks like more of a multi-pronged approach. So it's like, okay, go this route with independents, but also go this route with third parties, right? And go this route. Just make sure it's completely outside of duopoly. Count on big money coming up against you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
But
They'll be coming up against us.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to clarify in my mind exactly what you mean. And then on top of that, once you get that apparatus going, also use the outside movements of people who are not into voting to push also organizationally to work in tandem with the people who want to work outside of duopoly in order to also help push for a general strike. So you're looking at it from a multi-pronged approach. That's what is that more of a vein of what
multi-pronged approach, but even conceptualizing it in this way. The litmus test is basically negative. It's saying you vote against people. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Pushing out of the independents and the third party candidates is positive, because it's saying here are the people to vote for, because if you want representation, you can't vote for the Democrats, you can't vote for the Republicans. So here are people that will represent you because they have no one else to turn to. They can't turn to the big money because they know that the next election you'll get them. That's the accountability. In other words, you raise the question of accountability. They will know that just like you pushed out all those Democrats and all those Republicans, if they don't deliver, you're going to push them out too. Because the money won't be in your way anymore.
We have a change in world right now. Like I said, with the strike coming up, we have more countries joining BRICS. People are frustrated.
Oh, yeah, they're frustrated all over the world. There's revolutionary movements all over the world. And the change to a multipolar system, well, that, of course, is essential, but it's happening. We see it happening. It's so clear, the outlines of it yet. Yeah, the United States is going to fight back, but there are too many people in favor of the multipolar world.
Yeah, so the U.S. is going to be taken down some notches.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't want to idealize the idea, okay, of a multipolar world. What a multipolar world actually delivers is balance of power politics. And we know from history that every 50 or 100 years or so, balance of power politics fails.
Joe,
Yeah.
we have another show coming, or they have another show coming on after us.
Yes, I know. I know it's time for us to get out of here.
Yeah.
Okay, so I do want to thank you, JB, and you, Sabby, for the very strong discussion and you, Greg, of course, and Brandy, and Dee. It was a wonderful discussion.
Yes.
So thank you and Happy New Year.
Thank y'all for having
Great
us on.
convo.
Y'all have a happy new year, and may your 2023 be filled with amazing joy.
Thanks.
Yes.
Happy New
Happy
Year.
New Year.
Bye.
What,
Happy New Year,
what
everyone. Check
Gregory
me out
said.
at NT Production.